Okay. Hello, Anna and Chris. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We are excited to roll into a great conversation as we get started. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Kalia Garrido. I'm a managing partner here at Great Data Minds, and I head up our events and our digital strategy and kind of all the cool things that we're doing. Of course, most of which right now is online, but we also have events live and in person, hopefully this summer again. So for those of you who don't know who Great Data Minds is, just a little bit about us. We are a new breed of data collaborative. We hold events, like we said, online and in person. And if you can check us out at greatdataminds.com/events, that's where you'll see all the cool stuff we have going on. And to introduce what I know will be a stellar conversation, we have Anna Navarette. She's here today. She's one of our top advisors here at Great Data Minds. And we have Chris Berg, who is the founder and CEO and head chef at DataKitchen. Great Data Minds is excited to announce our new partnership with DataKitchen. And so we wanted to just kind of get on the line today and learn a little bit more about what you guys are up to over there.
All right,
So
thank you.
Anna,
I'm
I'll hand
excited
it off to
to
you.
talk about it.
Hey, thanks so much. Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to be with us. So let's start on the simple stuff. Let's talk about you. Can you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction. So I guess, so who am I? So I'm kind of a, an old data nerd, I guess you could call me. So I've been in the industry for about 30 years. And the first actually 15 I spent developing software at places like NASA and Microsoft and a bunch of startup companies and in various roles doing some algorithms and some software. And then about 2005, I switched over to the sort of more complicated world of data science, data engineering, data visualization. And I worked for a company that, kind of did analytics for healthcare. And so in that role, I was the COO. I was kind of the person who had to make the trains run on time. And so my life was, it was a good job, but my life was tough because I had a boss who was very bright, knew a lot about healthcare, and would go off and sort of invent ideas. And he would bring it back to me, and I'd have to sit in a room with a data engineer and a data scientist and maybe someone who did visualization. And, we'd whiteboard it up, and it's really fun because I'm an engineer and I like to build stuff. And so I'd go back to my boss and say, hey, this is going to take us 2 weeks. And I'd be very proud. And he'd sort of look at me in his sort of Harvard med school way and look down at his glasses and say, Chris, I thought that should take 2 hours and not 2 weeks. And so I'd like walk out with my tail between my legs. And then we had, thousands of people using our analytics, and they were very intolerant of if it was late or, God forbid, if it was wrong. And I'd get phone calls from people saying, the data's wrong. If you don't do it, you're out. And then we had hired just a whole lot of smart people. And this is even before the sort of big analytics boom. And they all wanted to try new things. They all wanted to innovate. So they had their favorite tools. We had our differences between the R and Python data science people. We had our differences between the SQL and visual ETL people, their differences in visualization tools. So people love their tools. And so I lived this life for many years of how do you go fast and create new original insight? How do you do that with a very, very low error rate? And then fundamentally, like, how do you innovate? How do you try stuff and give people freedom? And so when we sold that company about 6-7 years ago, my co-founders and I realized that life that we had lived in this analytic consulting company was the life that people who do run data and analytic teams are living now. So if you're a chief data officer or a VP of data engineering, you still have kind of a sucky life, right? Because you're still caught between all these forces, right? The data providers who are giving you crappy data, the customers who are demanding original insight, and this sort of complex people and organizational structures that you live with. And so we've tried to take that idea and turn it into a concept called DataOps. And so our company is devoted to simply sort of making the idea of DataOps happen in the world. And so we've first thing we did, or one of the original things we did, is wrote a manifesto, and then we eventually wrote a book. We have a software product that supports it, but I really do think that the principles of DataOps are a better way to work in data and analytics, and that's what we're trying to help the industry do.
Great, great. So I did read your manifesto. So tell us a little bit. DataOps is starting to become a bit of a buzzword. So give us your thoughts on what is DataOps.
Well, I think it's I think it's fundamentally looking at something that's not being looked at right now.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times when you're doing data science and analytics, you're looking at the result. Can I get the feature done for my customer? Is it the visualization, the model, the data transformation? You're obsessed with what happens in the production and the architecture. And those are all good things. Don't get me wrong, but being sort of an older technical guy, I've sort of seen that that's really not the source of innovation. The source of information is something next to all that. And think of it as the production line. Think of it as the operational center to be able to do data and analytics better with all the tools that you have and all the data. Because fundamentally, I think DataOps has a different view of the world in that, the problem isn't that you've got too much data or that you've got, or that, your algorithms are wrong. It's that this thing on the other side of it, the operational center, the operational work that you have to do is really, really important. So instead of sort of focusing on just the next feature, focus on delivering things quicker to your customers in an iterative development way. And that comes from Agile. And then also focus on reducing your error rates, which really means, it's sort of data quality. Is it wrong? Is it late? And that comes from sort of lean and total quality management, almost the Toyota manufacturing. And then also just focus on collaboration with your teams. And so collaboration is sort of a strange word, but most people who work in developing analytics aren't the solo hero anymore. They're part of a team, and teams work on different pieces of the puzzle. And then when they work on it, they deliver it to some team that goes into production. And so focusing on cycle time, low error rates, collaboration, and then finally actually measuring the process of how you do your analytics, not measuring how fast you can deliver, what is your error rate, and running your organization in a metrics-driven way is what DataOps is about.
Okay, so why do it? Why does the idea exist?
There's a couple of ways that you could touch the elephant. And sort of one is that emotional center, right? The sort of suffering I had as a COO running it. It just sort of, it wasn't a fun job. And I just didn't like my wife looking at me on Saturday morning when I was at the sort of soccer match and sort of slinking off to like go on my laptop and fix a data problem or calling someone up to fix a data problem. And I didn't like having my boss look at me. So the emotional core of it is kind of, I think that we can, as data and analytic teams, we can reclaim control. And the kind of hair shirt of suffering that we have to do isn't right. And then the second sort of reason to do data ops is that, and maybe it's the first, is that honestly, most data and analytic projects fail. There's a lot of statistics out there that 10 out of 12 models don't make it into production. 60 to 80% of data and analytic projects fail. The amount of companies reporting as being data-driven is going down. The amount of errors that companies have, 70% of companies have way too many errors in production. And so it's kind of a dirty little secret, and I don't mean to be Debbie Downer here, like in Saturday Night Live, but a lot of analytic projects aren't working. And my fear is in this time of COVID and recession is that people will start to look at the great investment that's happened in AI and data science and machine learning and saying, I'm not getting the result on this. And people will lose their jobs and budgets will be cut. And so we've got to, as an industry, focus on the customer, making sure that they're successful and focusing on the result and doing less focusing on the shiny new algorithm software tool. Because fundamentally our problems in data and analytic aren't because we need a faster database or a better UI for an individual contributor to do their work. Those things are important, but they're not essential. The essential comes from focusing on the people and the process to help them use all the tools and all the data that they have.
Great. Well, you mentioned earlier about the Agile, using Agile as an approach to do the delivery and do it faster. In data projects, that's always been a bit of a struggle. Can you talk a little bit more about how DataKitchen can help us with that?
Yeah, so I think if you look at Agile, and there's lots of ways that people, number one, focus on delivering value to their customer quickly and iteratively. And if you think of Agile as that definition, and there's lots of process flavors of Agile and Scrum, Scrum and Kanban, and DataKitchen as a company doesn't really help you with you can go to the library and there's plenty of Scrum Masters who help you be Agile. But the problem is that your Agile process, being focused on the customer, having small empowered teams deliver small amounts of value iteratively, is the right idea, but it's not enough. You need actually a technical environment that can support that people and process. And in software, that technical environment is broadly called DevOps. And that involves things like continuous integration and deployment, observability and monitoring and production, infrastructure as code. And I think those things are sort of the part of the foundation that goes into DataOps. And there's some more complexities that you need to extend the DevOps concepts. But it's just, there's a lot of organizations I've seen who want to be agile, data warehouse teams, data science teams, and they believe in it, but they struggle, and they end up doing these kind of Wagile, Potemkin projects, right? They've got the posters on the wall, but they're just doing dev sprint, dev sprint, dev sprint, and QA sprint, QA sprint, QA sprint, and it takes them 3 months to deploy 20 lines of SQL from dev into production. And so there's just got to be a better way, and it's again, I think there's everyone wants to focus on, I think everybody in data analytics wants to make their customers successful. And I think the ones who have at least a little bit of wisdom know that they don't know what they're talking about. And the best thing that you have to do is get something in front of your customer and get their back on, and then iterate and improve. And almost anyone universally agrees on that. The question is how you do that, right? And so, and then, and not only how you do that, but also how you build, how you construct technically good things, and how you have a good data architecture, how you trade off design versus iteration. And those things, I think DataOps can help as well.
Great, great. So, at Great Data Minds, we talk about the human component in data projects. You also talked a little bit about the collaboration. Can you kind of talk a bit more about the inter and intra projects and teams, and how you kind of get that collaboration moving forward?
Yeah. So if you look at software, there's this idea of dev and ops, which is sort of a collaboration between development teams and the operation teams who run the software. And that's kind of a nice one-to-one relationship. Unfortunately, in data and analytics, there's lots of people who do quote unquote development. Maybe they're a data engineering team who works centrally on a data warehouse or data lake. Maybe they're called data enablement. Maybe they work in Redshift or Hadoop or Spark. There's a whole bunch of things. Maybe there's a data science team who's been recently hired who works for the CEO. Maybe and a lot of organizations have what people using self-service tools, which are great, like data prep tools like Trifecta or Paxata, or visualization tools like Tableau or Looker, where they can actually do a part of the value chain. And so at the end of all this, you've got people, you've got your IT team who's giving the data, you've got your centralized data team, maybe you have a data science team over in some part of it, and then you've got these multiple people working on at the tip of the spear with the customer. But the customer sees the chain of value through all those groups. And then they ask a question, well, I want to see this new data set. Well, then who does it? Where does it go? Which team does it? And then from a technical argument, which part of the value chain does it live in? And those are actually really important discussions. But the collaboration across all those groups who are doing development is important. And then every one of those groups has a path to put it in production. If you're using Tableau, you can go into the UI and click a button and say, push it to production. If you're a centralized data warehouse team, you probably have a dev environment, a QA environment, a production environment. You have a written path to production. But if the idea is that you don't know what you're doing as a data and analytics professional, the best way to do it is get feedback from your customer. But completely opposite of that is you want to build well-structured, well-engineered systems. How do you do all that in this world where you've got different teams, different production teams, and this sort of network of relationships that you've got to manage? And I think that the idea of DataOps spans all that, and that the collaboration in DataOps is a different idea. It's not a let's hold hands and have more meetings. It's a let's build a technical environment where we can collaborate together, where everyone can kind of press a button and say, will I mess this up? And in development, and if I'm going to change if I'm going to deploy something to production, you want a button that says, will I break crap? And if you've got that button, then you can actually move fast. And the software industry has learned this lesson. Like they say, can we get a recent college grad and have them to deploy to production in their first 2 weeks? And how many data teams can do that now? And so that sort of autonomy actually makes for people who are happier employees and more empowered. And maybe it shouldn't be 2 weeks, but there's levels of gray there, but you certainly shouldn't be a 4-month process where you go through multiple levels of paperwork, and your best people doing technical review, or it shouldn't just be a button and you just try it, and then if your CEO doesn't like the report, they start yelling at you. You know, it's this fear and heroism dynamic that I think we've also got to get through in our teams.
Right. So finally, put a little bow on the whole thing. How does DataKitchen help move DataOps forward?
You know, I think we really focused on sort of large enterprises and helping them transform from a less agile, waterfall, error-prone, short cycle time, unmeasured environment to a DataOps-driven process. And we do that by having a software product. And we don't replace any of their tools that they currently have, because people, if you look at every category of tools, there's 50 ETL and data tools, there's 50 visualization tools. Those tools plug into our platform. And so what we do is we help them with the tools, and we help them deploy those tools iteratively into production and the code that drives them. We help them measure and observe for errors once it's in production. So then they are running around on Saturday morning with their wife giving them dirty looks because they're fixing bugs. And then we help them manage the environments that they run in. And this stuff is, for a lot of organizations, we're trying to say this is really important. And this is huge value. And if you look again at the analogy of the software industry, when I was a software engineering manager in 1999, we had people who were called release managers, and they were paid less. And you know, they played the mandolin at parties, and we didn't think they were great engineers. And now you fast forward 20 years to the software industry, those are called DevOps engineers, and they're actually paid more than your typical software engineer. And so this area that wasn't got attention has a huge amount of attention. So we're trying to help people work through that transformation. What does it mean organizationally? What does it mean technologically? And how do you actually get from, you know, zero to at least some data ops working? Because it's, you know, people and process things are hard. So we have a consulting component and a software component. And we also work with a bunch of different consulting companies to help, who also are very good at helping people move through that data ops transformation.
That's great. You know, Chris, I want to thank you again for joining us today. You know, data projects can be exciting, but like you said, they're also can be quite difficult. And it looks like with DataKitchen, it can be one of those tools that helps assist moving this step forward. So I'm very excited, and I love the DataOps principles. I think it's really going to take us to new levels once people start really digging into it.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and have a great day.
Thanks. Same to you.
Thanks, everybody.